Whenever I think about how we approach and navigate a missing person case, there's always a question that I find myself asking in the very beginning. And it's, if we're talking about a missing human life, should we ever dismiss a potential tool, right?
Mhm.
Oftentimes I think that we should offer every available resource and tool available to help find that missing person. With the Find Me project, we utilize advanced tech, intelligence, sonar and diving, drones, just all types of really cool and fascinating things. But there's an area that we don't often take advantage of, and I think it's an area that a lot of people don't fully understand. And it's what we're going to talk about today, and it's intuitive or psychic investigations. So, again, I'm very excited for our conversation today. If you're okay, I'd like to start by giving you a proper introduction.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me on too. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, you are a psychic medium, psychic detective, and investigator with a lifelong love of inquiry and evidence, fascinated by how people form beliefs, test what's true, and decide what actually matters. After more than 30 years as a teacher, big congratulations there,
Thank you.
including time inside juvenile halls, expulsion schools, and military academies, you have learned that the real magic isn't the answer, it's the question that cracks a case open. You work with families on missing person cases, cold cases, unsolved murders, and unexplained deaths. Your approach is less vibes and more, what do we actually know? You're now based in Washington on the West Coast, and you're building community around ethical investigation and discernment. Kelly Coulter, I'd like to welcome you to the Find Me podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. You are doing, I think it's a good point to thank you. Just reading your bio, you are doing amazing, amazing things and helping out a lot of families. So thank you.
Thank you.
So, one of the new things that we're doing here is, as we get ready to have a professional such as yourself come on to our show, we are starting to reach out to our community, letting them know what the topic's going to be and asking them if they have any questions that they want to ask. So this is a question that was submitted by Mike V, and I'm hoping you can help us answer it. So Mike's question is, if a family is desperate for answers and feeling stuck, how do they explore intuitive or psychic investigation responsibly without creating false hope or being taken advantage of?
Ah, that's such a good question, Mike. Um, the first thing I would say is nobody should solicit you. So no psychic medium should come to you and say, "Hey, would you like me to work on your case?" Um, that's the first thing. You also should not pay like humongous fees, right? In fact, most of us don't charge for our time. We Some might do like for a write up, right? And that takes a lot of time to write it up if the person wants a write up. But generally, this is from our heart helping. So no one should come to you. Most of the families we work with are desperate because they can't get law enforcement to work any further on the case, so they feel stuck. Um, what are some other things? I think also you should do some research on who you would want to work on your case. There are quite a few of us. Some of us work together, uh, but really research who that person is, research their background. So I don't know if that answers your
Wonderful.
question, but that's a really good question.
Yeah, no, it definitely answers. Out of curiosity, and we're going to dive into this here in just a moment, but do you ever see, so, you talked about how some of you work together. Do you ever see the overall potential or capability when you combine forces, if you will? Um, do you see that grow versus when you just work with a family by yourself?
Yes, I actually love working with a group. I'm going to call it professional group where we work together. So if we have a case and we okay it with the family they allow us all to work on it, then we all work on it. I also have like one off. So I have a friend in Australia, and she and I will, hey, I'm working on this case. Can you see what you're picking up? And then we compare. It really helps to validate. Or some of us have different, I'm going to say specialties, I guess. Like I'm not a forensic artist, right? But we have those on our team. So they will do, I might describe what I'm seeing and then they can draw it up, or they might just draw up what they're seeing in their, their mind. So
Yeah.
yes, I love working together.
A mission with purpose to find the missing using the power of social networking and cutting edge technology. We're military veterans, technologists, scuba divers, and relentless seekers. From deep forests to sunken vehicles, from silence to signal, every clue matters. If you've ever felt the call to stand for something greater, this is your moment. This is the Find Me Project.
That's powerful. Thank you for that. All right. So to get started, I want to actually rewind, and I want to go back to a time when you were 12 years old. Your father had just appeared in a dream, and then the phone rang. Can you walk us through that moment?
Yeah, sure. Um, my dad had been in the hospital. I think at that time we knew that he was going to pass, um, just not when. And so it was the first time that I remember having a visitation dream. And very vividly, he came to say goodbye and a few other things. I don't remember everything, but the visitation dreams are always one that I remember. So I'm 59 now, and I was 12 then, and I remember that dream like it was yesterday. So those are the visitation dreams that I talk about. And actually, that is one way that I gather my information for psychic detection. So did I know what that was about? No, not really. It was literally when I woke up in the morning, the phone rang and my mom answered, and it was the hospital saying that he passed. And so in my 12-year-old head, I think, okay, well, is that a coincidence? How did that happen? But I really believed that that was him. So that was probably the first time that I knew that that could happen, or knew that something was a little bit different.
Yeah. So now, how long did it take you, from that incident at 12 years old, how long did it take you to realize that, wait a minute, I may have something, I may have a special gift here? How long did that take you to realize?
A long time, because I just fought it. Like I said, I was back in the day, we didn't have internet. I had no way to research this. I did what probably most people do, the roundabout way. So you start looking at astrology or, horoscopes. I was always interested in that. And I did get into like paranormal investigating and went that route. And so it wasn't until much later, much, much later, um, or for me, it was after a surgery that I had that went wrong. And a lot of us get kicked into this after like a life altering event. A lot of people have near death experiences, right? And then their abilities, they recognize them and they get stronger. So for me, it was that surgery probably. And then so much
Yeah.
later in life, yeah.
Okay. I maybe want to circle, actually, it's not in topic right now, but I do find the near death experience uh, realm situation very, very interesting. So maybe if we have time, I'd like to double back around to that.
Sure.
But I think there's a lot of people out there that have a tremendous amount of potential. They have a skill set and they may not realize it. So, let's say that there's a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old girl, a boy that is going to listen to this episode at some point, whether now or into the future, and they just experienced something like you did back when you were 12. What advice would you give to them?
Well, there's so many resources now, right? You can find good mentors just on YouTube channels, watching somebody that you feel like you connect with. And that's also another important um, thing you should do, even if you're an adult, is find a teacher or a mentor that you're drawn to, that you feel like, I guess, is like a soul friend. So I would also, do some research. It's kind of hard when you're a teenager because then, if I don't really work with teenagers too much because I have to have the mom's permission or parents' permission, right? Um, but I do. It's just finding someone or finding a group of other people. There's, tons of groups where people are that age that are have experiences that they can, check into.
Yeah. Now, in getting ready for our conversation here today, I was reviewing some of the material and information that you have out there, and I noticed one thing that actually struck me as very interesting, and I'm curious to know what you meant by it. You said that this wasn't a calling; it was a reckoning. What did you mean by that?
I know, such a interesting word, right? Um, I guess I guess for me, like being a teacher was a calling. Like I felt called to teach. This kind of like kept coming at me, I guess, and I didn't want to embrace it at first, or I didn't know how to embrace it. So I had to keep getting these little um, hints or coincidence, whatever you want to call them. Um, and they actually had to be hard. Some of them were hard. The surgery was hard. That was, I mean, I don't know if you want me to talk about that a little bit, but that is actually how that was like the final straw because I have these visitation dreams, right? And my grandmother came to me before I had surgery and she said, don't do it in a dream. And so I postponed it. And then, the hospital called and said, well, we have another doctor. And, I did a lot of research on him and he was fabulous on paper. And I thought, well, maybe in the dream she meant, not with the doctor I was going to be with before, right? Well, no. So, it was terrible. It was a life altering experience. And I guess that had to the difficult situations had to keep coming to me before I really embraced it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, if you're comfortable with it, I'm fully open to you maybe talking about that a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of just how it was. I think I, it wasn't a surgery that I had to have, but I, it would make my life easier, I guess you would say. Um, and so I researched it. I did a lot of research. I researched doctors. I, researched the surgery, and then I had this dream, and it was my grandmother, and she said, "Do not do it." And so I listened for about, 4 months, and then they kept calling. Well, we have this new doctor, so I researched him. Um, on paper, fantastic credentials, but not so in person or for this surgery. So, it uprooted my entire life. I had to go back to teaching right after it. It was just very difficult. And so I had to kind
Yeah.
of, I guess, find out again who I was as a soul person, who my soul was.
So now, actually going to your teaching or your time teaching, I know there was a situation that had happened with two former students. And before I go into that and ask you a couple questions around it, that situation that occurred with those two former students, were you still actively teaching at the time?
Yes. Well, yes. So,
Okay.
yeah. The first
Okay.
one, do you want me to go into it or do you want to?
I do. Yeah. Let me kind of cue it up a little bit here,
Sure.
and then you dive right into this because this is really interesting. So, you had two former students, both who were murdered, both forgotten, like it happens all too often. What happened internally when that occurred to you?
Well, the first, actually, they were brothers, and I think that's what really got me. The first one I had when I was a seventh grade English teacher, and I was really young. And I mean, it's devastating the first time you have a student pass and then in such a violent way. And I remember thinking, like there's not much I can do as a community. The community kind of came together, and there were things we could do in the community. Um, but at that time, I was not embracing my psychic mediumship. And then fast forward to I had his brother when I taught in juvenile hall, and the age difference was quite a bit. And it was after it was in 2021 when he passed, and it was after, I can't remember if I had just retired. And it made me think back to the first death, and I thought, how tragic for a family to have two sons pass in such a violent way. And then it was one of those stories where, law enforcement worked on it, and they have only so much they can do for, the time period. But then it just got forgotten. And after I retired, I went and became a volunteer police person. And I thought that would be a route to go, right? But, when I asked the detective, they didn't really remember the case, and I get that, but I thought, gosh, someone has to remember, So
Yeah, yes, and I have many questions here. So this is something we see happen all the time, and it's tragic to hear that you and probably your team and many others are also seeing this. Where when I first started to see this, when we started our work with the Find Me project, we were quite interested to figure out, why is this happening, right? Is it malicious? Which it wouldn't make sense. Why would law enforcement? They want to help. I mean, they are certainly helpers in our community. So that's exactly what we found out, was that they're obviously not trying to intentionally do this, but on average, what we were able to identify was that your average police department per day takes on 15 additional cases on top of that missing person case, or death investigation that they had just opened up. And it's a challenge. We also find, and I'm curious to know if you see this as well, I think there's a breakdown when it comes to, like, for example, we just got referred a case 2 days ago for a missing woman who's been missing several years now, 12 years to be exact. If you go back and look at that first public release, it was about 3 sentences, and that's never changed. So fast forward 12 years later, no new information, even if it's the tiniest bit. There's nothing. It's this same thing from 3 years ago. Do you often see that same pattern whenever you're working, missing person cases?
I do. And
Yeah.
that was the case with the older brother, or the brother that passed, the second one. Yeah, like 3 lines. And I was looking last night, and I know it's not solved, and I don't think there's much work done on it.
Yeah. What? So I spent about 3.5 years in law enforcement after I exited the military, and I don't think I was never a detective. I didn't, although I took a lot of missing person cases, I never investigated them. I was more on the SWAT tactical team and just did some other things at the time. But to my knowledge, I don't think we ever consulted or took advantage of intuitive or psychic investigations. So throughout your time volunteering or working with the respective law enforcement agencies, did they ever take you up on that opportunity or offer?
No. And I think part of that, when I was volunteering, is because of where I lived. It was a very, like, psychic mediumship was looked down upon, small town. I do know here in Washington that some are open to it. And a lot won't say they use psychics. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is so? It's such an unusual thing. It goes back to my opening question that I had. If you have a missing human life, there's nothing more important than a human life in my eyes. Why would you not want to use every available resource? I mean, why do you think that they tend to look down on that?
One thing that I don't know, but an excuse I hear a lot, or maybe not an excuse, but an explanation that I hear a lot is if we were to find that person or solve that case using the psychic's information, it wouldn't stand up in court. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that's what I hear a lot.
Yeah, I don't. It just doesn't make sense. When you look at the totality of everything, you think you would just want to have that as another tool to put in your toolbox and
Hmm.
utilize. It's now, this sort of opens the door to talking about, what your structured investigation process looks like. So I want to kind of run it from the beginning where, let's say that there's a family listening, and I know there certainly will be, where they have a missing loved one, or maybe a friend that's missing somebody, a community member, and they come to you and they say, Kelly, we need your help. We don't know where else to turn. What's the first thing you do? And what are sort of the things that you do after that?
Yeah. So I have a like form on my website, and that's how people find me, or word of mouth. And so they fill that out, and I set up a Zoom call, and then I mean, they kind of are vetting me, and I kind of vet them, right? I have to make sure that I'm able to help in their situation, um, and I have to make sure that this is, yeah, a case that I can help on. And then I just ask them not to tell me too much because I don't want to know anything about it. Besides, I like a picture. I like to know the date of passing or when they went missing, location. Um, and I think that's it. Just basic facts, and then I'll hop off the call and I'll ask them to give me a while. And sometimes I get a lot of information right away. Sometimes it takes a while. I also ask them what their objective is. What is the end goal here? What do you want to find out? What happened, or if the person's going to be apprehended. So I try to meet their objective, and then I work on it. And then I gather the way I work on it is, like I just said, I psychometrize through the picture mostly. And I do, like, my first round is just trying to get a feel for the person, their personality, what things come up around them that I see. I also will maybe draw like a location that I have no idea what it is. It's kind of fast and furious the first round. I just write down whatever I get, words, dates, numbers, whatever. And then I kind of like to sit with it a little bit and come back at it for a second round and see if I get something else that can validate what I got the first time. And then, depending on which way I go, I might do some remote viewing, actually take myself to that place as that person. What do I see around me? What do I feel? Hear, see, all these things. I might do a sketch. And like I said, I'm not a forensic artist, but even if it's just like a circle with two eyes and a nose and a mouth, I can, right to the side, you know, uh, mole on the cheek, or, receding hairline. Just to jot down what I'm getting. Um, Also, another tool that I like to use is forensic astrology, where we take the same thing I just said about the date last missing or when the crime occurred, and see if I can validate some things that way. So I do all of this, and then I meet back with the family and see if they can validate some of these things for me. And so, sometimes I'm way off base on some of the things, and they'll say, I don't understand that. Okay, then what do you understand? Let me go back and focus on these things. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's kind of the
Yeah.
process. And then, sorry.
It's a process. Yeah. I mean, thank you for explaining that. So I don't know, you actually mentioned one thing that I wanted to lock in my memory. So thank goodness I didn't forget this. Remote viewing.
Hmm.
I don't know, so I don't know if you've seen a lot of the things that have come out in recent years with some of the releases from the government, from the United States government and other organizations. But again, this kind of goes back to, when you have law enforcement agencies that look down upon some of this. But when you look at what has been released, this has actually been professionally researched. And if you read some of the papers, which they are out there, and most of them are not heavily redacted, they appear to be fairly successful at their remote viewing capabilities back many years ago when they were researching it. Have you ever looked into any of that?
Yeah, I have. So
Yeah, it's
interesting.
fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. And I
Yeah,
do
it's
know they still do use that.
oh for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely they do. Yeah.
So I think like
Um
any oh sorry.
no, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say I think like any of these skills, it's some people are gonna be like good right off the bat, right? Like if you're a natural athlete, but other people you have to keep practicing, to see what like remote viewing is you should just kind of the facts, right? You're not making up a story. And I think a lot of people
Yeah.
want to get in there and just kind of make up a story about what they see and what they, all these things.
You know, listening to you describe your process, I'm actually interested, to get your thought on this. And maybe this is something you already do, but let's say that you're going through your process again. A family reaches out, you've started your early process. Um, do you think that it could be advantageous to receive additional information or intelligence, if you will, about that person? So let's say that it's a missing person. You were given three or four things, but maybe you have a team that is able to gather intelligence that's not readily available or was unknown to the family that provided you, any of this. Maybe if we're talking about human and sex trafficking, maybe something was found within the interwebs that links that person to a human or sex trafficking group. So, providing you that additional information, could that help you with your overall process, or do you prefer not to have that at all?
For me, not at the beginning, but if I were to start picking up something like that, I would love that as a way of validation. But I like to get the information first. And I don't know how you would do that, if you're working with law enforcement, but maybe, I don't know, maybe the family has some of this information as well. And then it's almost like another psychometrizing of that information, I guess, if you will. And then I would focus on that and see what I pick up around that. So I do like to have that information, just not maybe at the beginning.
Yeah. Now, one thing I'm actually interested to get your thought on is, there's so much information. When we look at a missing person case, even if it's not getting a lot of what I'm going to call news, whether local, state, national, there's still a lot of traffic that picks up with this. And it's actually quite interesting because, if you look on social media for a missing person case, you'll see information all over the place. And unfortunately, a lot of that information becomes, diluted, and it's false, it's incorrect. So I'm curious to get your thought. Do you feel like cases get polluted?
Hmm. Absolutely. And for me, that makes it harder to work. It's as when I'm teaching this, as I do teach this as a mentorship and teach other people to do this. It's they so badly want to look at the case, and I say, don't do that because you can't you can't unsee it, And I think it's kind of well, not kind of, it's irresponsible for people to put things out there that they're just speculating. We have so many of these armchair detectives, which are great because a lot of them do a lot of good work. But when we put out things that aren't factual, it can do a lot of damage. I'm thinking of a case that's going on right now where, somebody it was accused and it turned out to not be true. Um, I think I heard the
Yep.
other day that a psychic is also being sued because they said somebody was the, killer. So yeah, it does
Yep.
get polluted. And then you can't help but think, are they right? Could that be right? And you go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. I think I know the exact case that you're talking about because I was just reading it yesterday, ironically. Um, if it's the same one, I certainly don't want to say the name, and I couldn't remember it if I wanted to. But um, this is something that I think no matter what you do, I know this is something that I often struggle with, and I'm curious, how do you filter out your own ego?
Ah, well, let's see. I mean, of course, I want to be right, right? I always want to be right, but I guess that's one thing. Some things I'm very confident on, but others I need some validation to back it up. So I don't ever want to say and I hear this said, I know this is what happened. I know it. This is what happened, and um, just because I think that is partially ego. I don't think I want to be. I don't really advertise, right? People just find me, and I like it that way. Um, I don't want to be like really known for this, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
But I do like to teach other psychic mediums how to do this and embrace their skills.
yeah. This is really important to me to understand your thought on this. So again, what we're trying to do here with the Find Me project is you have a missing person case. We want to offer resources to that case that have never been available. Whether we bring in ex forensic and behavioral profilers,
Mm.
psychic and intuitive investigators. Name the resource, name the capability. That's what we want to do. And we'll often start by, just like you said, we do the same thing. To be honest with you, we don't want a ton of information. We typically say, give us minimal information, and then we start to do our intelligence gathering, and we run it through our advanced system we built that pulls all of that data in. Right, things that most people don't even know exist out there about them. Well, we find those, and we start to build that out. When you think about everything that we do, or like teams, I think we're certainly not the only one. There's many other initiatives and groups and organizations that are doing this, and good on them. But how do you think that we can combine your skill set into what we're doing so that way we're able to achieve, the ultimate end goal of bringing resolution to families, finding the missing person, or at least providing some answers?
Oh, yeah. I guess being open to it, and generally, I think what happens with my cases is I report to the family mostly, and then they take if they find something valuable to law enforcement. So it's a roundabout way, right? Um, I guess if people could think of us like, I always use this and people get mad, but like a search and rescue dog, right? Think of it that way. That's a tool people use. They're able to pick up the scent, but they don't always find the person, but they might lead you in the correct direction. It's kind of thinking like a psychic medium, kind of like that. It's just another way to validate if this psychic's picking up this information and we got it over here, that could be a good hit.
If right now, if there's a family listening where whether they just had a family member go missing, or maybe their family member's been missing for months to years,
Mhm.
when do you think is a good time in that process, from day zero to maybe current day, if we're talking about years, for them to reach out to a professional like yourself and say, hey, Kelly, we need your help? What's a good time frame for them to do that?
Yeah. That's hard, right? I guess if it's a current case, and we have a lot of those missing teens, right away. I would say right away. If it's a Coulter case, probably when law enforcement is no longer able to help on a regular basis. When they feel stuck in the investigation, when they want some answers, and they just want to. A lot of times it'll be like families who just want, this is what I think happened. Well, after, right? I mean, they want to know what happened, and so if I pick up information that they already think is true, then that's like validation for them. And I'm not going to say closure, but it's maybe a better feeling than not knowing at all.
You know, if we have any listeners or people that are watching this video and they want to learn more about what you're doing, or maybe they want to take, one of your upcoming workshops or events, can you sort of guide people on, what you have going on and where they can find more information?
Sure. Just like everybody else, I'm rebranding, I guess you would say. So a lot of my main website is mediumkellykristen.com, and you can find all this information on there as well. But I also have like a partner website called Third Eye Sleuth, where that's more if you want to take mentorships with me. And I do very much like what you do. I make a lot of friends with interesting people like forensic handwriting specialists, body language, and I invite them to my mentorship, and they speak, and then we'll practice whatever whatever their topic is. You'll find classes like that on there. I do have a mentorship coming up. It's in person. Last year I started with Austin case files. This is going to be here in Washington. It's called Port Gamble Case Files, where it's like a deep dive, really intensive mentorship, learning how to do this and finding out what your skills are. And that one is at portgamblecasefiles.com. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, I have an event coming up the 14th and 15th. It's a little bit different. It's called The Art of Investigation. And when I moved to Washington, I mean, there are so many more of my people here, I guess you could say. And so I wanted to try to embrace the people up here. And so a lot of them are from this area. I have like a UFO detective, I have a couple of Bigfoot. One of my guys is interesting. Bigfoot, he's a CSI. And so his thing is to look at the, footprints and latent footprints and say if they're, uh, real or not. I have a lady who's doing a Ouija. She's a Ouija researcher. So how to use that responsibly, the history of this. I have a lot of paranormal teams, psychic mediums, just like a group of different people, and how they investigate. And we all, I think, are looking for the truth, right? And so how they find their truth. And so again, that's at artofinvestigation.org if you'd like to join.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. And we're going to be sure to put all of those links in the show notes. So if anybody is interested, you'll easily be able to find those and navigate right on over.
Thank you.
Kelly, I'm going to get ready to close out, but I want to just tell everybody, if this episode challenged you in any way, I think that's really good, because that means that you're thinking, right? I want to say thank you to you one more time. I think people are going to really find this episode valuable, and I hope it opens the doors to law enforcement and other agencies, whether local, state, or federal, to utilize your skill set more often.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I think it's really important. You're doing important work. So thank you for including me.
Yeah.